Hello and welcome to ET Markets Crypto TV presented by CoinSwitch Kuber. I'm Miloni Bhatt. When you work, when you shop, conduct business, you're doing it over your devices, phones, laptops, and you generate data, often critical data like bank details, healthcare records, which you'd like to keep private. Now, if you're a business, say for instance, if you're a bank, you'd have reams and reams of very important financial data of so many individuals, companies, organizations. And so we all have to take precautions to protect our data from cyber threats, ransomware, phishing attacks, etc. The problem is that despite increased awareness, ability, and regulation to protect data, the risk of data breaches are growing. Data breaches also have data privacy implications. A deeply interconnected global economy has amplified concerns around the world about cybersecurity threats and data protection. So today, let's delve a little bit into this from a Web3 and crypto perspective. To help us understand, we have with us Mr. Subimal Bhattacharjee, who is an independent advisor and consultant on cybersecurity, defense, and technology policy issues based out of New Delhi. He holds a postgraduate degree in mathematics from the University of Delhi. Mr. Bhattacharjee has served as a member of the Research Advisory Committee of the Global Commission on Internet Governance. Mr. Subimal Bhattacharjee, thank you very much for your time today.
Thank you very much for having me here.
So the words cybersecurity and data privacy are often used interchangeably. Are they really the same? What is the difference, if there is, between the two terms, especially in the crypto space?
Yeah, definitely, they are used interchangeably, but I think there is a little bit of a difference. Cybersecurity per se is the larger subset, I would say, when it comes to the crypto space. And when we look at data privacy, we are looking at a kind of a subset where we are looking at the privacy of the data that flows, in the network among the nodes. Whereas cybersecurity per se looks at the whole ecosystem and also has some technical connotations also besides the usage and data related points of concerns.
In the crypto space, do you think that cybersecurity and data privacy become two sides of the same coin, with cybersecurity asking for more transparency, but also raising the concerns of data privacy? Is there a conflict that exists between the two?
Apparently, it seems so, but I think the larger measure and the larger realization is looking at a secured transaction ecosystem. So when it comes to implementing that, you have to look at quite a few factors. First, the protocols that define the overall, the security framework. A typical blockchain ecosystem has quite a few features built into it. It looks at something right from the nodes to the smart contract, the ledgers, all of that. Now, at each and every stage, there could be a risk, and overall, when you take everything, in terms of a complete system that allows transactions to happen, you have some more additional risks also built into it. So per se, when your goal is the same, to secure an ecosystem, you are going through a lot of steps. Apart from the building blocks, you also are at a point of time when you would get very specific regulations that will come in. And then, of course, the usage, the onward march of technology. So if we look at all of these blocks, it would seem that they are far much more similar in terms of the realization. However, per se, we tend to think that there is a certain difference, and the difference is that from a cybersecurity point of view, we want a lot of things to be more transparent, and from a security per se, we would want a lot of things, not necessarily in a public domain or known to all. So that's the classical balance that we do every time when we look at the overall cybersecurity scenario.
When it comes to Web 3.0, do you think blockchain is more or is it less susceptible to cyber threats and attacks compared to Web 2.0?
It's a very relative concept. Web 3.0 looks more at openness, transparency, and yet at the same time, more security features built into it. Now, with Web 2.0, over all these years, we have had a certain level of familiarizations. We have had a certain level of the solution architecture and the management principles that have come in terms of securing the space or even looking at the data protection and data privacy. When it comes to 3.0, it is more of a evolution that is happening from 2.0, where we are looking at far much more, you can say, closer blocks, you can say far much more specific targeted activities. So I think over a period of time, the concerns that we have in terms of having this as a far much open space and possibly susceptible to more crimes, that going to be addressed. But as of now, it seems we have a better grasp on Web 2.0 than Web 3.0 as it happens in terms of the crypto infrastructure.
Okay, now, going to crypto, blockchain is pseudonymous. Can you explain what this really means? How does blockchain protect identity of users? And how is this different from Web 2.0, where data is often mishandled and misused?
See, when a blockchain operates or a blockchain network, typically the nodes are the building blocks, and the blocks that go from one node to the another, and then as much as it goes in terms of a network. Now they are primarily going through the public key infrastructure. We have the encryption keys which form the basis of blockchain technology. In a way, it is a savior in terms of security. In a way, the distributed ledger in the blockchain ecosystem that's secured using encryption, and the encryption, the public key, private key infrastructure is something that has been used or is being used. Now, when a transaction happens, it corresponds to the public key infrastructure, which allows the anonymization, and hence you have the pseudo anonymity, because to that public key infrastructure would be hidden the private key infrastructure of the particular user or the particular node that actually certifies and authenticates the particular transaction. So hence, there is a pseudo concept of, or an understanding of pseudo anonymity that comes in, that that anonymity primarily is guaranteed by the private key, whereas everything that's out still there, or maybe the transparency part is the public key. So that's how we can possibly understand this whole concept.
The idea of
and how does it differ from Web 2.0? In Web 2.0, the concept of public key, private key has been very less used. When it would be a transaction between 2 points or 2 particular blocks, and there it is more of a username, password authentication kind of a system, rather than the key system, which is absolutely on the encryption methodology.
Okay, which is better?
Obviously, the encryption method is better because it takes you, or it gives you far much more secure. It takes you to a protection, you can say, which you can measure in light years. So so obviously that is much more secure. Passwords are far much more susceptible to theft and cyber crimes.
Do you think that the traceability of blockchain, the public record of every transaction, does that clash with the idea of data protection framework?
I don't think, because, again, the traceability primarily goes up to the public key infrastructure. The public key that is there in the network, that is what is going to be traced. But the private keys are, simultaneously not coming out, in a traceable network or something like that. That is still encrypted and sufficiently well encrypted. So I don't think, that really sets the concern. However, as has been also seen, there have been incidents where private keys have also been hacked, or, someone has got an unauthorized access, either because of the callousness of the user or, in some other social engineering fashion. So I think, that's where the concern remains. And hence, one has to be also secure or very conscious. And there's a lot of responsibility on a user, particularly when it comes to, operating in a blockchain network, or rather, it's that responsibility is provided by the system architecture itself, not necessarily by regulations at this stage.
Okay. So, what are some of the data privacy mechanisms that can be put in place in a decentralized system like a blockchain, especially because all nodes have access to the ledger and blocks of information?
See, today, before you answer that, you have to possibly take a call or understand a little bit about what are the typical kinds of, attacks and all that you are seeing in your networks. Because depending upon the attack vectors, you are devising your cybersecurity mechanism, which in turn is impacting your, data privacy or data protection measure. So the typical, types of attacks that we can see, the liveness attacks, the double spending attacks, the private key security attack, we just spoke about it, the transaction privacy leakage. So these are, some of these areas which directly impinge users' capacity to be able to, transact, you can say, securely. So now looking at that, you have to take steps about how do you plug these attacks, and at the same time, you are protecting the data privacy. So I would suggest, or I would think that a mix of technical signatures or footprints, along with some regulatory mechanism. Unfortunately, we still don't have very specific regulatory mechanisms in the country. We have to work somewhere around the available threat vectors and the places that we have to secure. Around that, we have to work out a strategy. So I think this will be work in progress, very soon, because the interest around the virtual cryptocurrency is pushing a lot of impetus also upon the, anyone you can say who works in the space like us, to look at how do you ensure seamless transactions and secure transaction, and yet at the same time you protect the data privacy standards that generally today would be guided by the service level agreements, or possibly that whatever regulations we had in 2011 till we specifically bring the data protection provisions under the law.
Do you think that the scalability of blockchain raises the challenges when it comes to cybersecurity and data protection?
See, the scalability primarily, or at the first stage, the scalability also raises issues about the quality of the transactions also.
Yes.
The blocks themselves, become targets of delays or some other kind of, you can say, activity that impinges its optimal functionality. Now, if something like this happens, there are possibilities, where we speak about, forked attacks and everything. We can have scenarios where attacks can actually happen in the period of those transactions. So there is a security element risk. There hasn't been really any major incident that has precipitated fear that because of scalability, cyber attacks also proportionately increases.
Okay. So, one of the things about blockchains is the transaction immutability. Does it mean that there is no respite from potential cybersecurity breaches and losses because no transaction can be reversed?
To an extent, yes. That transactions can be reversed. The stamps that have been made, the digital stamps, footprints that are there, they can never be reversed. To an extent, that is there. But then there are instances where attacks are being perpetrated on the whole networks, which have the capacity to even reverse engineer some of the steps that would have been taken at various stages of a particular transaction. There are the possibilities that it could disturb a smooth flow of a transaction from point A to point B. Hence, that's also something for the techie community and the regulatory mechanism to work on.
Do we have enough people, resources, and understanding of this evolving system, especially given the lack of regulation, to be able to really manage and mitigate these risks?
Partially, yes. What I would say is that while work on regulations is at its own scale or at whatever stage, or I would say the philosophy with which the government is working. But the advances in technology, the scenario to plug the loopholes, that definitely motivates the techies, to come up with more work around the encryption systems, around the points of concern. So I think that apart from regulations, the enthusiasm in this country right now, looking at the speculative aspect of the cryptocurrencies also generates a lot of interest, in which in turn generates a lot of even business potentiality. See, even in this budget this year, as you've seen, the government gave signals that the cryptos are not going to get banned. It's a different story that they will not get the any kind of a significant or classification as a currency, but they will continue. They will be traded, because the fluctuation levels of these currencies still creates that speculative impression that one day I can make a huge amount of money, maybe I might lose too. So there are clients who would get into it. Already a few crores of Indians. India is already now one of the largest countries in terms of Bitcoin users. So that aspect will also drive a lot of interest. Hence, everyone will try to tighten their grips. And I would think, a country that has so much of contribution on the software front, even around encryption, I think would get into the act sooner, irrespective of the regulatory regime.
So are we able to keep pace, especially when it comes to the risk management? When we compare it with the way the technology is advancing, every single day, and especially when it comes to people who are getting involved with crypto?
I think, we are still doing pretty well. I think the whole ecosystem itself, the blockchain ecosystem itself eliminates a lot of, security concerns. For example, encryption brings in a level of security. Number two, the distributed denial of service attacks, a very common form of cyber attack, that absolutely gets killed away with this technology, because this is decentralized, so the risks are spread around, and hence not being able to target centrally a network and decapacitate it. You might be successful in targeting say 3 or 4, but then if some blocks fall off because of an attack, the others pick up. The blockchain doesn't actually break. So I think one, the technology allows it, but I think the concern and fear of a catastrophic scenarios hasn't arisen. And if that happens, then we have to worry about many other areas also, because the primary means by which such fears can, or such attacks can happen is by breaking the encryption. Now, for that, I don't think, that alarming situation has been raised. Of course, with quantum computing coming and all, there are other aspects to look into, but for now, I think we are okay.
Okay. Also, unlike with traditional means, here the end users, and you touched upon it, they are completely responsible for managing their own digital assets. So, the responsibility at the end of the day rests to an extent on the individual as well. And do you think that is a game changer, unlike, say, Web 2.0?
Yeah, of course, it is a game changer. And of course, it brings in a sense of responsibility on the user also. By and large, people are, responsible, you can say, when it comes to transacting financially and online. Looking at the kind and the class of people who are doing these transactions at this point of time. But then, the sense of responsibility also sometimes sets in, which you cannot prevent in any way. So I think we have a scenario where people are going to be conscious, because they know the fluctuations are also such that you might be wiped off in no time. So I think it's a
Evolving
non-defeating scenario. Yeah.
Okay. What are the challenges that you see with this new technology, where we are at this point, where we want to go, the way the world is moving, looking at the time that it takes when it comes for regulation, blockchain knows no boundaries. So getting the whole world to come together and to, come up with a system in which everyone can participate, but also, which is safe for everyone to participate in. What are the challenges you see?
Yeah, see, Miloni, this is now Web 3.0, and all through the evolution of the internet and hence the web or cyberspace, the primary focus was anonymity, so that internet as an ubiquitous medium can grow so that anonymity is fostered. Now here, when you are getting into still continuing with anonymity, you are getting into a scenario where you are digitally able to track and trace each and every footprint. And that is an authenticated footprint. So from an earlier scenario where some impersonation could have very easily happened, is happening, and all kinds of crimes have gone. Here, your transactions are getting to get far much more authenticated. And so even if attacks or the negative elements or the crime syndicates, everyone gets into it, his strategy or his effort is going to be breaking into encryptions, getting into networks. It's going to be less of social engineering, but more of very high funda, encryption breaking technologies and all, which means that this could even go up to state and very sophisticated non-state actors who get support from the states. And mind you, we are at a point of time that in all these years, we don't have a global mechanism to regulate many aspects of the internet or everything that flows out of the web. There is one issue of the technical infrastructure of the internet, but there is the larger issue of the usage. So we are not able to come to any kind of scenario. If you look at all other worrying scenarios, say the nuclear or the space, they all have international regulatory mechanism. Here on cyber, you don't have any regulatory mechanism. So there are challenges. Nations have to come together. Encryption standards have to definitely be enhanced. But I think the time has come for a global dialogue about how do we go around all this, managing and handling those crypto assets, because so much money is flowing into the system. Yeah. And then there is no responsibility. So anyone can have, anything can happen. I think it's the worst form of lottery that anything or like this has ever happened in this planet.
They're calling it the wild, wild west. My last question to you, Mr. Bhattacharjee, given the fact that this is a global technology, of course, there are global challenges, as you just pointed out. Do you see the global consensus coming together? And when do you see the timelines for it, or when do you see it happening?
Very difficult question to answer. I don't see something emerging very soon in terms of cooperation. There have been, just when we were looking at the internet of multilateralism versus multi-stakeholderism, it's almost going in the same line where a set of countries would never want to accept the reality that, now this is the most important network of money laundering or, paying for all the negativities that could even destabilize states. So I think work has to happen. Not necessarily the UN is seen as a body, not necessarily even the engineering cooperation groups are also seen as something that can foster such thing. I think the nations, the powerful nations, have to sit together and work out a mechanism. The punishment for such crimes, the enforceability of a multilateral or a multi-stakeholder system to look at all these digital assets and their transaction is very, very crucial. So it will take some time, but I think, somewhere the realization will happen sooner than later.
Here it is. I mean, hopefully, it is sooner rather than later, because as you yourself pointed out, there's a lot of, money that is kind of flowing into the system, flowing out of the system, lots of people getting attracted to it. And especially in India, a lot of young people, first-time investors, putting a lot of their faith into crypto. Mr. Subimal Bhattacharjee, thanks very much for joining us today, and thank you for your expertise.
Thank you so much.